Hey everybody. Last week I recorded a video for ADHD Awareness Month. I got a really nice response from a lot of people on it. And I think, one of the things that really resonated with people was the idea, especially at the end where I talk about, the fact that I think that a lot of things that I now associate with my ADHD are also things that I associate as, I can no better term for them than superpowers. And of course, through the nature of ADHD, could I come up with all of these on the fly? Exactly. Was I 100% organized when I did the video? No, absolutely not. So, and I've found that my brain keeps on working on things, right? Whether I want it to or not, right? It'll just keep working on things. So, days later, um, I came up with some more stuff, and I wanted to devote an extra video to that, and I'll probably keep devoting videos to it, um, as many of these as I can come up with because I find them really interesting, and I know that they can be helpful to a lot of other people. So this one, this ADHD superpower that I think is out there is basically a lack of hierarchical thinking, and that is, um, I have noticed. Throughout my life that I have an extremely hard time learning hierarchies or respecting hierarchies. And of course, this has caused, yeah, a number of problems for me in life. And I've had moments where I thought, like, that this was a weakness of mine, that this was something wrong with me, that was really, that the challenges that it was causing were really unfortunate. And if only I could learn to stop doing it. But I have come to the realization that the my inability to naturally respect hierarchies is a wonderful thing. And let me explain a little bit why that is. But of course, just like last time, I think there's stories worth telling about it. I think that I probably uh, first noticed this um, around the same time I stopped enjoying going to school. I, had a perception that um, it was sort of the first time in my life I was learning that adults were not always perfect, that they didn't always do the right thing, that they weren't always sort of 100% mature and together and on point with what they did. I think my earliest recollection of this was I remember being in seventh grade and being in social studies class. And my social studies teacher announced to the class that, well, naturally, English is the official language of the United States. Now, having grown up bilingual, I was very sure that this was not true. And I raised my hand. I got called on, and I said, actually, that's not true. The United States does not have an official language. And that's still not true for anyone who's wondering about that today. And I remember I I thought like my teacher was going to be really happy that I had done this because, like we're all here to learn. And this is my naive 13-year-old version of it. My teacher was really, really upset. She got really mad at me and insisted that I was wrong. Um, and it took until, the next time we had class and she said, like, listen, this happened in class. And Chris said that English is not the official language. And that's actually true. So she did correct herself, and then she sort of added, but the way in which he disagreed was not was not right. And I remember being really hurt by this at the time, and more than anything, internalizing that I had done something wrong. And who knows? Like when you tell one of these stories, like, yeah, maybe I was a disrespectful little snot in it. Um, I'm willing to accept that that's possible, or just that I came across that way, but certainly it wasn't my intention. And especially from that age on, I people who know me know I love swimming. I was crazy about the sport of swimming growing up, so crazy about it that I decided to make an adult career out of coaching the sport of swimming. And at that same time, when I got up um, into the seventh grade, I got called onto the top team of my little youth swim team that I was on. And my parents were having a lot of trouble getting me to practice. So on a lot of days, I was late at practice. And the coach was mad. I mean, he was upset. Like, he was giving me a really hard time about the fact that I was late to practice. And again, um, I'm actually really grateful for my lack of hierarchical thinking, because I think that if I had fully 100% respected hierarchies, what I would have just internalized was 100% like I'm bad because I'm late. And in actuality, it wasn't even my fault at the time, because I was 13 years old. I couldn't get myself physically to practice. That was something I was reliant on my parents to do. And, they were both working professionals. Like, it was not easy for them to just like every day get me to something that started at, I don't know, I remember when it started, like 5:15 or whatever. Somebody had to leave work early on a daily basis, and that caused a lot of problems. And honestly, in most cases, it was my mom um, who was doing that stuff at that time. So it was a really, really, really big um, strain on her. As I got older, I think probably the next big juncture was when I got to college, and I joined a college swim team. I had like really amazing, I think, coaches through a lot of my high school years who I thought were able to get me to really respect them without sort of coming down on a very like, you should respect me because I'm the coach. You know what I mean? I found people who um, you know were, I just think, really thoughtful about the way that they led, and so could get me to show up in the way that you probably wanted somebody who was a student, who was an athlete, who was a learner in whatever you're doing to show up, but without being so heavy handed about it. All that changed for me when I went to college. I mean, probably this is like a silly little thing, but I think sort of became representative for me of what was going on. My college coach was the first coach I ever had in my life that wouldn't let you call him by his first name. And the explanation there was like it was somehow disrespectful to use his first name. And I remember like that was a really bad way to start with me. Like um, it actually made me, it had the inverse impact, I think, of what he wanted it to have. Instead of making me think like, oh yeah, like I really respect this guy and revere this guy, coach. I was like, why does this guy need to be called that? Now, like as I look back at it as an adult, I think if he could have a second draft of explaining it, he would have been just like, well, that's what I like to be called. I don't like it when people use my first name or whatever. There's a way he could have explained it without probably, or justified it, that would have made more sense to me in the time. Um, because certainly the 2022 version of me is able to accept that certain people just want to be called something, right? And people sort of deserve to be called whatever they're called. Like, my name is Christopher, and people always ask me like, oh, do I call you Christopher or Chris? I say only my dad and my wife call me Christopher, and for them it makes sense. For everybody else, it just makes sense for them to call me Chris. So um, I really chafed under that for 4 years, and there became like a number of situations where that sort of bled into how we, in my opinion, how we were being led athlete wise, that there was a lot of like, do this because I said so. Um, and that kind of stuff never worked with me. It always had the opposite effect that I expected it, or that they probably expected it to have. And it actually like served as a big distraction because I was always trying to figure out like why, you know, why can't they justify what they're doing now? um, as I transitioned into professional life, like I entered a profession that, curiously enough, is crazy hierarchical. Like, just I think partially, I will say the positive part of it is that swim coaching is like or coaching in general is kind of an old school apprenticeship type model. Like I was talking to somebody else about this. Um, a couple weeks ago that the first thing you learn to do in coaching is repeat somebody else's work. So it's just like almost like you're like an artisan in a workshop. Like you don't get to work on your own designs first. Like replicate what somebody else has done. So in terms of structuring a practice, or um, how you even conduct a practice, just learn. Like when you start off in the coaching profession, almost always the expectation is that you learn by repeating the way somebody else is doing it. I think there's a ton of positives to that. Like I think, especially when you're getting started going on, it's so hard to have an idea, or really really know what you want to do. You may have an idea of what you want to do, but oftentimes it's really not fully formed. It hasn't been tested out there. It hasn't, um, you haven't had the experience enough to sort of come up with your own secret sauce. And so that part of it, I have found periodically that I can get into, but over time, like the more that I sort of mull over stuff, the more I slip back into my old tendencies. And so, again, in all of these sort of hierarchical situations, I have found, in the words of another person I talk to all the time, that I'm a bad passenger. That is, eventually I want to drive the car because, um, you know, I, I tend to want to learn how systems work very thoroughly. And then, I have a desire to tinker and iterate with those systems. And that's where the part where I think that this sort of lack of natural respect for hierarchy is such a wonderful thing. That's where I've come to in my life, because I think we can all think of many instances where lack of hierarchical thinking is leads to a lot of innovation in things. So if you can't like just if you just cannot accept that something is the way it is because we've figured it all out, and that's the best way to do things, and that is just how it's done. And please don't bother working. Well, you're never going to come up and create any new way of doing things, right? You're just going to like go like, well, let's just keep, you know, doing what we're doing, right? Um, I think rather than a weakness, probably all the things that I am best at here as we stand at the recording of this video, probably in some point have derived from my lack of ability to uh, accept that whatever existing hierarchy um, is in place is eternal, is immutable, is um, is perfect in essence. And although that can lead to a lot of conflict, and it can sometimes lead to some emotional pain coming out of that conflict, especially with super powerful people, because I found in general, the more sort of you have benefited from the hierarchy, sort of kind of normal, right? The less welcome you are to some rock thrower coming and saying like, "Hey, why don't we do things differently?" Um, so I, I I know that it can lead to a lot of angsty and hard situations, but I have reached a point in my life where I think it is well worth it. And um, when I take some time to be thoughtful and think about it, I realize that um, this um, natural inclination not to buy into hierarchies is an absolutely wonderful superpower. Um, and I'm really grateful for that. So I hope you're enjoying these videos. If you want to listen or read more positive psychology, snippet based content, I know I go into long stories here. You can follow my Instagram, underscore coach, Facebook, Krista Santa's coaching. Um, if you'd like to work with me, the best way to reach out to me is through my website, christcoach.com, but you can contact me on one of those other platforms to stay on top of my DMs, or my Facebook messages. So I'm really happy to hear from you. And this has been another ADHD superpower video, another positive psychology based video, and I'll see you again soon.